So I'm speaking with composer Heather Christian, whose fresh voice as a storyteller has been behind some popular and acclaimed short films. Heather scored the short film Gregory Go Boom with director Janicza Bravo. The two worked again for their feature film debut with Sundance darling Lemon. The film follows a man whose life begins to unravel after his girlfriend of 10 years leaves him. The film has an amazing cast, including Brett Gelman, Judy Greer, Cera, Nia Long, Jeff Garland, Rhea Perlman, Martin Starr, Mullally, and many, many more. Heather, thanks so much for speaking today. I really appreciate your time getting to talk to you.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here.
So to start, I'd love to know your journey and path to becoming a composer. How did music kind of enter your life, and at what point did you realize, okay, I want to focus on film composing?
I started classical piano lessons when I was 3. My great-grandmother was a concert pianist. And so my mom put me in lessons super quick, and my piano teacher was a holy terror. I took her the first piece I ever wrote when I was 6, and she told me that it was monotonous and terrible.
Wow.
And I didn't write another piece of music again until I was 23 years old. So sort of a circuitous journey, but I had always taken singing quite seriously. It wasn't until I got to college, I went to drama school, thought I wanted to be a performer. It wasn't until I graduated and realized that my singing voice was way too bizarre to market in any commercial theatrical way, that I started writing my own material for myself, pretty much just as like if I'm going to work, I need to write myself something that works by necessity. And then I sort of met Janicza through this theater connection. We both went to theater school together, and she was the first person to sort of be like, "You're musical, write me a score." And wait, what? I didn't really consider what I was doing composition in any respect. I was like, maybe this is sound design, or like I'm decorating her pieces.
Right.
And when Janicza transitioned from theater to film, I sort of came with her, and that was my first foray into composition. So I didn't really choose it. It just sort of happened that way, I was somebody that she was comfortable working with. And so I just played a mad game, and still am playing a mad game of furious catch-up, trying to figure out what the hell I'm doing, trying to put music to picture. But now in meeting more film composers, I'm sort of realizing that's just sort of the name of the game.
Yeah, I've talked to many who've kind of fell into it more than, there's a few that have pursued it as a passion of them, but it kind of falls in their realm of music or sound, and they kind of find in that path, and it's kind of an awakening. I mean, when you finally started writing for film, did you discover something like, oh my God, like this is something that completely taps a different part of my brain, or I can
absolutely.
So, I guess growing up, were there any artists or musicians or even composers that really made an impact on you? Any styles of music?
Oh, certainly. I mean, I had this really strange upbringing in that I was being trained classically, but my hands weren't big enough to play the romantics that I wanted to play. So I was always cheating and wanted to play Rachmaninoff in secret, or wanted to play. I really loved Debussy and Chopin, but was being forced to play Haydn. And also, I grew up in Mississippi, and I have a very long family line of Southern musicians that either dabble in honky-tonk or blues or gospel or just sort of like the traditional American canon. And I grew up singing church music, gospel music primarily. But never these two worlds would meet until, very recently, when I'm like, oh, right, I'm a Southern American composer in a lot of ways. Like the swamp creeps back when you least expect it.
That's awesome.
Yeah. But I mean, in terms of like those kinds of influences, like I always I mean, my dad grew up playing Muddy Waters and Jimmy Reed in the house, and I was obsessed with Irma Thomas. And listened a lot to Irma Thomas and Aretha Franklin and all of those soul legends until I found Michael Jackson, and then it was just a different story.
So, I mean, now that you have this amazing film Lemon, which played at Sundance, and I'd love to talk about working with Janicza, because you worked on Gregory Go Boom, which is a short film she directed, and then now you're working on Lemon. So what is the working relationship like between her as a director and you as the composer? So, I mean, she pulled you into this world, so you guys must have a pretty close bond.
Yeah, we do. We do. She's like my oldest collaborator.
Yeah.
She's I mean, like I said, we made theater together for years. And it's actually translated kind of in I mean, our process isn't very different. She gives me a script, and Janicza is an incredibly visual director, so I'll get like an entire packet of like, these are the images that I'm responding to, these kinds of shots, this kind of light, this kind of color, this is what it feels like, and I start writing immediately. And what I do is just like amass, in the case of the short, one library that I think of more of like a concept album ode to whatever it is that I think the movie is after these conversations with her, that then she cherry picks. And from that cherry picking, I can go in and really sort of like tie it up, make it all work together, and turn it into a piece that sounds like itself.
Wow.
In the case of Lemon, it turned into like, okay, here's 3 completely different directions. Which I thought she would choose one from, and she chose all 3. And then it became a more meticulous jigsaw puzzle to try and get fit together.
Wow, because Janicza has already established herself as a director with a very distinct style, and that makes her film stand out. So for Lemon, and you talk about these 3 different styles. So what, I mean, besides that, was there any other challenge that you faced with the film? Because I know that anything even with the slightest comedic kind of touch, I feel like tone is really the hardest part of nailing down a tone.
Yeah.
So was there anything with Lemon that kind of you had to kind of tackle and kind of take over?
Yeah, but it's also because Janicza has a sense of humor all her own, which, like, so serendipitously, Joy McMillan, the editor, just got implicitly. And because sometimes I don't get the jokes until I see the final cut.
Right.
I sort of have to like take out of my brain that I'm looking at it like it's a movie, and I have to look at it like it's I don't know, like 3 different plays that I'm trying to be very earnest with, but and then think about how it could be funny later in terms of timing. But because I approach music in a very character-driven way, like I feel like at least, like, for example, like with Isaac, it was like, how does he think of his life right now?
Right.
So the music can take itself completely seriously, but because we have this idea in our heads that he's a total schmuck, like the serious nature of the music plays as comedic.
Right.
Challenge. I mean, there's a lot of challenges for a primarily non-film composer composing music for a film.
Right.
Yeah. But a lot of it has to do with sense of humor. I mean, that's the main thing, is I live in fear that I've missed the joke.
So, I mean, when you, as a composer, and it's going to be for any project or tackling anything, I guess what you mentioned on Lemon, or at least Janicza will give you images to start working off of, but is that like your normal starting point in your process? Do you try to, or musically, do you try to find a theme? Do you work kind of to find certain melodies or colors before you kind of start building, I guess, the body of the score?
Well, usually it's an approach. I decide on an approach first, and like approach for me is like a container of like, how am I going to write it? How am I going to think about it? So for, like, in the case of Lemon, the first thing that I hooked myself onto, kind of obviously, as primarily a theater composer, was the seagull. this terrible play that they're trying to stage. It's not a terrible play. It's written by Chekhov, but it's a terrible production that they're staging in Lemon.
Right.
This is a play that I know very well. So I was like, and actually, weirdly, the emotional arc of Lemon sort of mimics the emotional arc of The Seagull. So I was like, why don't I write like a vocal oratio for The Seagull?
Wow.
That's happening in Isaac's brain. And so that gave me sort of a set of limitations that then I could work off of. It's like, okay, so I'm working with a vocal chorus, but I'm also working with monologues taken from The Seagull, so I have a text. And as soon as I get a piece of text, really the text sort of colors how the thing wants to be written. And then it just becomes about, like, counterpoint. What are the different textures within that? But usually it's, like, one or two gimmicky, like, imagination prompts that I'll start with before I start worrying about what it's actually going to sound like.
Cool. So, is there anything about a film that speaks to you louder than the rest? Like, I mean, you mentioned characters, kind of getting to the head of a character, but is there something like versus the characters, the plot, is it the look, the sets? Is there one thing that kind of rises above to kind of pull that first note out of you?
Ooh, yeah, language.
Language. That's interesting.
Yeah, language and like pace.
So just like the way the way the actor delivers the dialogue, or just the words on the page. Okay, wow, that's interesting.
Yeah, like it's not even the words on a page; it's more like how the actor delivers it, like or the tone of their voice, and you know, like what they make me think is going on inside of them that's not being said, and like if that's a frenetic thing or if that's a slow ongoing catastrophe, like those things from like an acting perspective are more fertile for me than anything else, I think.
I mean, that makes sense because you're trying to speak, your music is trying to tell the audience something that isn't being said or shown. So I think that makes a lot of sense, actually. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Lemon is such congratulations on the buzz around it, and it's such a fantastic project. But kind of now that you're in this world, in this industry, I know the discussion and the topic of female composers in Hollywood has really ramped up recently, and we all know it's a mainly male-dominated profession. But you've just come off this amazing acclaim from Sundance. And as a female composer in the industry, I'd love to hear your point of view on the subject, and what's going right, what's still going wrong, and do you have any advice for female composers that are looking to make a career here?
Oh, yeah, a little. I'm just sort of starting. I do feel like it is one of those. And in theater composition as well, and certainly in the music industry. I make records. In the music industry, it's not a thing if you're a girl or if you're not a girl. Like that's part of your look. That's part of your thing. Nobody really talks about it. Yeah. But as a person in charge in theater and in film, like as a woman. There's this weird sense of I have to act like the role that people normally assume the face is attached to in this kind of role, which is usually a white male face.
Yeah, exactly.
And the more that I do this, the more that I realize that like female creativity and female power is completely different from a male creativity and male power, and I feel like no, don't treat me like you would a male composer. Treat me like you would a powerful female composer.
Right.
That is an equal thing, but it is different, and I think more interesting. But maybe I'm just biased because I am one.
No, I absolutely agree. It's just every person and whether your gender, your race, you come with a completely different story and a different walk of life. So you can't be treated, the same as it's a completely different. You bring a different set of emotions and stories with you. So I think that's absolutely right. Yeah.
An approach and process and intuition. Like my emotional tuition is great. My
exactly
my ability to intellectualize is maybe not as augmented. I don't necessarily attribute that to my being a female, but
right.
I certainly think that we should all just sort of embrace that we're all individuals doing things completely differently, and different people take a different degree of talking to.
Exactly. Well, Heather, you've made such a big impact with Lemon, and congratulations with everything, and thanks so much for your time today. It was such a pleasure to to get behind your process, and congrats, and I'm really looking forward to whatever comes next.
Yeah, thank you. I so appreciate you taking the time to talk to me.